Last night, Trump delivered a national address. So what are the highlights of this speech? He announced that the U.S. will withdraw troops from the Middle East, but before the withdrawal, he plans to do something major, or rather, take a significant action. In my summary, there are 5 key highlights from Trump's speech yesterday. Then, after the Middle East war ends, there will be 5 major consequences. What exactly are they? This is the topic that Fang Wei brings to you today. So, another point, what was the attitude of the Supreme Court after yesterday's hearing? Can birthright citizenship be abolished? The third point is about the Rescue Act. As I've mentioned to everyone, this is the most important bill in the current session of Congress, but now it seems to have disappeared without a trace. There's no news about it at all. So what exactly is the current situation with the Rescue Act? That's another topic. Another thing is, after Trump announced his intention to withdraw from the Gulf War, what is Europe doing? Okay, this is also quite interesting. There are several rapid developments happening in these areas. These developments have, how should I put it, a very clear sense of foresight regarding the future world order. So what exactly is going on? All right, welcome to Listen and Watch. This is Fang Wei bringing you Good Morning America. Hello to all our YouTube viewers and greetings to all the listeners of Silicon Valley Radio 96.1. All right, now let's start by talking about last night. Last night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, President Trump delivered a 19-minute national address announcing that within 2 to 3 weeks, troops will be withdrawn from the Middle East. Let me summarize the 5 key points of his speech for you, and we'll get right into it. To the main topic, the first point is that we have already achieved our predetermined war objectives. Of course, as we all know, these include eliminating nuclear weapons, eliminating missile systems, eliminating missile production capabilities, eliminating Iran's navy, and in other words, crippling Iran's influence in the Middle East, in various regions. The support for terrorist organizations and their smaller affiliates. So we have already achieved these objectives. That's the first point. The second point is to thank the U.S. military for their sacrifice. About 13 people were killed and over 100 were injured. Third, the spike in oil prices will soon come down. So as soon as today's results were announced, the international crude oil price surged by 13%, with Brent crude reaching $112 per barrel. The average gasoline price across the United States also soared to $4. The reason for this is that Trump failed to resolve the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. He just withdrew the troops, immediately leaving a huge uncertainty. What will happen next? The crude oil market has no idea. Not knowing, they start to take precautionary measures, so the first thing they do is raise prices. The fourth point is to realize that when Trump says put, what does this war into the perspective mean? Everyone says we need to make a vertical comparison to understand the efficiency of this war we're fighting. Basically, it took 32 days plus another 2 to 3 weeks, so in total about 60 days to topple a regime, to bring down a government, or rather a country, to defeat a country. So he says that compared to World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and so on, including the most recent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, this war was much more efficient. Fifth, he says that you cannot appease evil. Trump harshly criticized previous U.S. administrations for sending so much cash to Iran, trying to buy Iran off so it wouldn't do bad things. But in the end, that was a huge mistake. So before leaving office, what did Trump do? He carried out extremely intense bombing for 2 to 3 consecutive weeks. Trump vowed to bomb Iran back to the 17th century. This is a common expression in English. Bomb them back into the Stone Age. What does that mean? It means leaving them with nothing at all. This involves Iran's power plants, oil fields, and even desalination plants. What Trump meant was, if the Iranian authorities, if you want to avoid suffering these losses, then open the strait now. Okay, let me rephrase this a bit. When Trump said this a couple of days ago, I thought it was just empty threats. But now that might not be the case anymore. Why? Okay, because for Iran, it has become clear that after Trump's speech yesterday, their regime has been preserved. With the regime secured, do you still want power plants? Do you still want oil fields? Do you still want desalination plants? All these things just in exchange for saving face, just in exchange for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. So for them, this does have a certain appeal. So when Trump made that statement yesterday, he was actually sending out a signal everywhere, kind of negotiating from a distance. This kind of negotiation is actually still effective. So I think if Iran really refuses to open up and keeps resisting until the very end, then Trump bombing oil fields and power plants is truly possible. Yeah, I think it's possible. My thinking is different from yesterday. I really think he might do it because Trump wants to withdraw his troops and bring them back home. The goal is to make sure Iran can't recover for a long time. He has already given up on the ambition of regime change. So in that case, if not all the power plants, then at least the major ones, those connected to the defense industry and the Iranian regime, would be bombed. If the oil fields are hit to the point where they can no longer produce oil, that is indeed something Trump might consider. As for whether the desalination plants would be bombed, I still think it's unlikely. But power plants and oil fields are possible targets, especially the power plants. What do you think? What's your assessment? Why don't we conduct our own little poll? Do you think that if Iran still refuses to open the strait in the end, Trump would bomb Iran's power plants? Okay, let's do a poll, shall we? If you think he would, just write yes. If not, write no, okay? Or you can write 1 or 2, 1 for yes, 2 for no. The after effects of the Iran war would actually be very far-reaching. Let me share with you my 5 observations. First, after this war, Iran would have its teeth pulled and be reduced to utter poverty. It would become a second Cuba, which means just waiting for internal changes to happen, because you have to understand, last December, Iran's inflation skyrocketed by several times. Actually, not just several times, inflation increased by dozens of times. It reached several 100%. So at that time, the economy was already on the verge of collapse, and now after the war, things are even more of a mess, a complete disaster. Moreover, if Trump were to bomb even a small portion of the infrastructure, especially the power plants, it would be even harder to recover. If Trump were to bomb the oil fields, then Iran would be finished, right? If he bombed the oil fields, Iran, which relies on oil to survive, would lose its lifeline. If the oil fields were destroyed, then during the process of restoring oil extraction and refinery operations, Iran would really be in a deadlock. All right, so this is what Trump actually said. If no agreement is reached, we will devastate every one of their power plants, and we might also destroy their oil facilities at the same time. Although oil is the easiest target to attack, we have not attacked them, because doing so would make them completely lose hope of survival or rebuilding. These are Trump's exact words. So let's all weigh this and see. I think that if Iran does not yield, attacking the power plants without opening the strait seems to me to be almost certain. Attacking the major oil fields is also a possibility, and the likelihood is I also tend to think it's fairly high. As for the desalination plants, honestly, I don't think they would be targeted, because that concerns the most basic survival needs of the people. Trump does have this, this sense of compassion. All right, so then what? Sanctions against Iran will continue. Everyone should take note of that. First of all, back in December last year, their economy was already on the verge of collapse. After fighting another 2 months of war, and with sanctions still ongoing, could this become a Cuba 2.0? Will there be internal changes? As for internal changes, it usually goes like this. The first generation of revolutionaries are the most steadfast, and they won't change no matter what. But by the second generation, it's hard to say. And by the third generation, real change might actually happen. This is just like what Dulles said back then. Dulles, who was Truman's Secretary of State. He said that after the Chinese Revolution, after China fell to the communists, he predicted that within 3 generations, they would change. Why? Because communism is a sham. The first generation, fine, they have revolutionary ideals. The second generation is still thinking about their vested interests. By the third generation, they start having other ideas. So, the first revolutionary leader of Cuba was Fidel Castro. So after he died, he passed the position on to his younger brother. This is very strange. Well, actually, it's not strange at all. It's very common. Nothing strange about it. In communist countries, it's always the brother succeeding the brother, or the son succeeding the father. It's just family inheritance. This is even more feudal than the feudalism that the Chinese Communist Party criticizes. So Fidel Castro passed it on to Raul Castro in 2018, and then in 2021, Raul Castro passed it on to someone named Diaz-Canel. The current president of Cuba, Diaz-Canel, has now raised the white flag. Even though he did it hesitantly, he still raised the white flag. At the very least, he's not a staunch revolutionary, right? So what Trump means is, this person called Khamenei, the first generation of these revolutionaries was completely wiped out by bombings. The second generation that came up was also wiped out. And now only the third generation remains. So it's possible that they won't be able to hold on. Whether there will be internal changes, we'll have to wait and see. It could happen in 3 months, maybe in 3 years, or even 30 years. We don't know. It's the same situation with Cuba. But as long as Trump is in power, he will definitely tighten the screws and make sure their regime can't last. All right, so this is the first point to watch. If Iran ends up in a stalemate, it will become a Cuba 2.0. The second point is that the differences in ideology between Europe and the US have been completely exposed this time. From now on, there will only be more divergence, and it's already happening. Macron immediately adopted an appeasement stance, saying that our strategy in the Middle East is completely different, and that we want to negotiate with Iran. To put it bluntly, it's just paying money to buy a way out. In my view, if they keep doing this, they're bound to suffer a major loss. This is exactly it. This is the difference between Europe and the United States today. I think the problem Europe faces now is that its principles are not correct and its will is not strong. Why do I say the principles are not correct? What are the right principles? It's that good and evil cannot coexist. If you try to appease terrorist groups, well, Europe now, especially the leaders of these Western European countries, they also have their own principles, and their principle is universal love. Then there are immigration policies and welfare policies. And energy policies, these are the three major policies that are destroying the European economy, all carried out in the name of universal love. Immigration policy means we must love those from the Middle East who are struggling, fleeing hardship, and seeking survival. Welfare policy is about loving the poor. Does laziness matter? It doesn't matter. We need to show compassion. What I have is what you lack. As for energy policy, it's about loving our planet. For the sake of our planet, anything can be sacrificed, so it's okay if the economy suffers. So how do you view these kinds of principles, this kind of universal love principle? So what about these Middle Easterners? The UAE says that this is a principle of unconditional love, a kind of suicidal universal love. They call it suicidal exclusivism, altruism. I would translate it as suicidal universal love. So now when it comes to Iran in this so-called post-war era, whether it's Macron or other European leaders trying to show love to Iran's evil regime, they don't buy it at all. If things go further, if Europe lifts sanctions on Iran to help it rebuild, then it will completely fall out with the United States. And from then on, Europe will be, as for Europe's future from that point on, well, it really would be impossible to say, wouldn't it? Actually, if you look at the whole world, I'm talking about the global landscape here, let me share my personal view. If you imagine the entire world as one United States, then today's America would be like a Republican state, a red state, while Europe would be like a Democratic state, a blue state. So they just can't get on the same page about anything. We've already seen this happen within the US. So what can be done about it? We can only let time reveal the outcome. If the red states keep getting stronger and the blue states keep declining, then eventually the residents of the blue states will experience a pendulum effect and start thinking differently. As for the current situation with these blue states, or, speaking of Europe, their hope is simply to endure, to tough it out through the Trump 2.0 era, because Trump can't stay in power forever. They're just waiting for a Biden 2.0 to come along. That's what Europe is counting on. As for the United States, or the red states, what they're hoping for is that the people of Europe themselves will rise up and change the direction Europe is heading in. Of course, when it comes to elections for several European governments, the timeline is still quite long. For example, the UK seems to be 20,220, at least 2029, right? I actually looked it up just now, but didn't finish up. Anyway, the point is, both Germany and the UK, France, these three countries, if they have such elections in the future, then it's only at that time that Europe might change direction. This is pretty much the same as the different states in the US, isn't it? If each state doesn't change, then of course you can't change anything. Well, this is just the choice of each state, isn't it? Right, so it's quite interesting. If you look at the whole world as if it were the United States, then in this way, the relationship between Lanzhou and Hangzhou mirrors the current world situation. So really, as I keep telling everyone, I believe there are two fronts in the world. One is the front between the Chinese Communist Party and the Western free world, and the other is the front within Western civilization itself. As for the former, that's the Chinese Communist Party gradually being. This is the fourth key point, when the CCP is being after its wings have been clipped. Moreover, this time, behind the Iran war, many of the CCP's so-called small maneuvers, actually they're not small at all, many very, very negative actions have been caught by the United States. So after this incident, the US now has an even clearer understanding of the CCP. So when the CCP's wings are clipped one by one, almost all of them are gone. After Venezuela, Cuba, and Iran have all been dealt with, at the very least, Iran has had its teeth pulled. Cuba will definitely be lost as well. Then, after the Middle East is settled, or after Europe steps in to handle the aftermath, the CCP will become Trump's next target. How will we deal with the aftermath? I'll talk to you about what the prospects will be in a moment, but the United States will withdraw its troops and pull out all three of its aircraft carriers. That's basically how things will end up. Eventually, everything will be pulled out. When the focus shifts to East Asia, at that point, the CCP will start to feel like it can't breathe anymore. That's the fourth point. The fifth point is more general, more universal. What does that mean? Trump is using this war to establish his authority around the world. Just try messing with the United States. This is like what happened in 1979, after the Iranian Revolution, when Iranian students stormed the U.S. embassy and captured more than 40 American diplomats, holding them for 444 days. After that, they launched what's called a bombing attack in Beirut, killing more than 200 U.S. Marines. Then in Iraq, they specifically developed those directional roadside bombs targeting American troops. I've talked to you all about this before. Actually, it killed 4,000 Americans. 4,000 Americans died, but not all of them were killed by roadside bombs. However, all 4,000 American casualties in Iraq were caused by Iran. All of this in the past was tolerated by various U.S. administrations, but Trump, back in 1980, said, "How can this be allowed? Where is America's prestige?" If he does this, if I were president, in the 1980s, Trump said, if I were president, I would take over Karg Island. Whatever he does, I will teach him a lesson. So, after waiting 47 years after this war, the United States has indeed sent a signal to Iran and to the whole world. If you mess with America, just try it and see what happens. This is America. This war is a milestone. America is serious, so don't joke around with us. So, I think these are the 5 after effects, and people will be much more wary of the United States. Do you agree with President Trump's approach? Let's do another poll, shall we? Do you agree with President Trump's methods, including his current troop withdrawal and the way he's handling things right now? All right, next, let me talk to you about a very interesting Supreme Court ruling from yesterday regarding birthright citizenship. I think there's a lot to learn from it. Let me say this, when I, Fang Wei, report the news, I always try to discuss the reasoning behind the news, at least the reasoning as I see it, especially when it comes to America, its founding values, and the way this country operates. Because the United States is a country that was deliberately designed by people. There is no other country in the world that was intentionally designed before its birth. Many countries just sort of developed by inertia, going wherever circumstances led them. So, to have a country that was purposefully and specifically designed, there's nothing else like it in the world. Probably only the United States is such a country, so the thinking behind its design, I believe, is very much worth learning from. It was essentially created by drawing on the achievements of several thousand years of Western civilization. Some people, like those in Iran today, will say, we have 6,000 years of Persian civilization. And now the United States is celebrating its 250th anniversary of founding. What they mean is that you are shallow, that your history is too short, but you can't say that. First of all, the founding of the United States truly draws on 5,000 years of Western civilization. Starting from ancient Israel, it's a civilization spanning several thousand years. Now, for Iran, as a Shia regime, you claim that Persia is your ancestor, but that's not really your ancestor, right? It's just like how the Chinese Communist Party claims it has 5,000 years of civilization, but in reality, it starts from Marx. That history, the one that came from the Soviet Union in 1919. All right, let's not digress too much. What I want to say is if you enjoy Fang Wei's analysis and find it helpful, please remember to subscribe so you don't miss notifications for future programs. Subscribe and turn on the little bell. That way you won't miss anything. Now let's quickly talk about some information from our sponsor. I'll be brief because when it comes to the affairs of the world, our influence is limited, but when it comes to our own health, that's something we can actually do something about, right? After talking about so many big issues, let me share something you can actually do for yourself. Many friends have recently sent me private messages saying that following too much news brings a lot of stress, affects their sleep, and even causes health problems. Actually, it's not just the news. Work can also be a factor. So this is a good opportunity to once again recommend to everyone something I've been suggesting for a while. The Red Sea Cucumber Health Capsules. Now, this isn't about selling anything, okay? Let me share a story from one of our fans in Texas. This viewer from Texas is 63 years old this year. He has meniscus strain, cartilage damage in his knee, chronic fluid buildup, and persistent pain. He has seen both traditional Chinese medicine and Western doctors, and the answer has always been the same: there's no cure. He could only rely on painkillers to get by, so with a why not give it a try attitude, he bought the Red Sea Cucumber Health Capsules we recommended. He took them pretty casually, just whenever he remembered, not on any regular schedule. Even so, after a month, his knee actually stopped hurting. So he said himself that it was simply amazing. Later, when he had a toothache, he took it more seriously this time, taking one in the morning and one at night. The key thing is, this isn't medicine, it's not a drug. It's more like a fruit juice or something, and it tastes really good. Actually, I eat quite a lot of this myself. Why? Because I think it tastes really good. That's the reason. So the toothache gradually disappeared as well. After that, he started buying it directly to give to his employees and even sent some to his family back home in China. He said that he basically tried it out for everyone first to make sure it was reliable before recommending it to others. Of course, let me make a statement here. Everything I've said is just my personal experience, and results may vary from person to person. This product is a nutritional supplement, not a medicine or pharmaceutical drug. So why are the effects so noticeable? It has to do with both the source and the processing method. The source is wild Red Sea cucumbers from Jeju Island in Korea. As for the processing, although they are very nutritious, handling them is quite troublesome. If you just boil them at high temperatures, it's very easy to destroy the nutrients. But for their health supplement gel, they use low temperature extraction. By extracting it in a way that doesn't destroy the core nutrients like sea cucumber, saponins, and collagen, the absorption rate is very high. Naturally, the effects are quite different. This is why the results are so good. Now, if you make a purchase and enter the exclusive promo code FANGWEI, you can enjoy a 15% discount for those who have already subscribed to the monthly plan. The second month will be at a 20% discount. If you sign up for the monthly subscription plan before April 22nd, there will be additional gifts as well. For more details, please refer to the information at the bottom of the screen. I won't go into detail here. All right, now let's talk about the big news from yesterday. Yesterday, the Supreme Court held a hearing on birthright citizenship. President Trump broke the precedent since the founding of the United States, as presidents have never gone to the Supreme Court before, but he attended in person, which shows how much importance he attaches to this case. That's one reason. The second reason is that he didn't know other presidents never went. Is that really the case? Because, of course, as I mentioned to everyone yesterday, other presidents never go to the Supreme Court because they respect the separation of powers and don't want to put pressure on the court. But Trump went precisely to exert pressure. So I have 2 points here, 2 observations. First, Trump really doesn't read much about what happened in the past. He also doesn't have many scruples when he does things. He just acts on his instincts. But if he becomes aware of something, if someone tells him, he will respect it. That's the first point. That's what I've observed. Second point. Sorry. Trump doesn't really read this or that book from the time America was founded or study this principle or that principle. I don't think he does, okay? But his values are indeed those of traditional America, and I believe these traditional values are something bestowed by heaven. As I mentioned to everyone before. I've talked about this repeatedly before. But anyway, let's talk about yesterday's Supreme Court hearing. Judging from the way the justices asked their questions yesterday, it's possible that the final outcome may not be what Trump is hoping for. Why is that? Hold on a moment. Because except for 2 justices, all the others expressed reservations about abolishing birthright citizenship. This blackout, let me put it this way, it's like talking to a brick wall. How should I say it? The representative for President Trump, who is the U.S. Solicitor General, said this. He claimed that birthright citizenship is being abused. With a global population of 8 billion, anyone could just buy a plane ticket to the U.S., have a child here, and that child would become an American citizen. How can this be allowed to continue? In his words, using a Chinese saying, he said, "The country will cease to be a country." And as for Trump, he also tweeted for several days in a row saying that what was originally meant to protect the children of black slaves, American citizenship, has now become a privilege for wealthy Chinese. As a result, hundreds or even thousands of Chinese surrogacy companies have sprung up. What kind of business is this? We have become the laughingstock of the world. There are also federal senators saying that in China, there are now more than 1.5 million Chinese children born in the United States. After being brainwashed by the Chinese Communist Party when they become adults at 18, they could come to the US and become ticking time bombs for America's national security. Some might not even return. They could stay in China, in Beijing, and still use mail-in ballots to vote for the US president. How can this be allowed? Do you all think these reasons are sufficient? Sorry, they sound quite reasonable, right? So what do the Supreme Court justices think? Take Chief Justice Roberts as an example. This is what he says. He says, "Why are you telling me all this?" What does that mean? What we're talking about here are the conservative justices of the U.S. Supreme Court. When they make rulings, what exactly are they basing their decisions on? Actually, as I mentioned to everyone yesterday, when we talk about textualism, what is textualism? It means basing decisions on the original text of the Constitution. It doesn't take into account the consequences of the ruling, nor the state of society, nor political trends, nor even national security. Okay, what they do is called judicial reasoning. What is judicial reasoning? It's about how the law or the Constitution is written. We make our rulings this way, according to the original text of the law, according to legal precedents, and using logical reasoning. Okay, as for what results or consequences my ruling may bring, that has nothing to do with us as Supreme Court justices, nor with the Supreme Court itself. That's their logic. So it's completely like a chicken talking to a duck, talking past each other, right? Some people might say, if you rule this way, what if it harms America? There's a problem with this law. The justice's response is, if you think the law is problematic, then have Congress amend the law or pass another constitutional amendment to repeal the previous one. But don't expect us to change the law through our rulings. This was the biggest difference that happened in court yesterday. So, regarding this difference, I don't know what you think. Do you agree with the justice's view? When I say justices, I'm referring to the conservative justices. But whether you agree or not, this is how the U.S. Supreme Court handles issues today. Of course, during the heated moments, Trump's lawyer, his lead counsel, also didn't dare to say that the text of the Constitution shouldn't be considered, right? He couldn't just emphasize the consequences and expect the justices to change their minds. That's simply not possible. Right? Because that would completely undermine textualism. So he still had to cite the original text and look for justification within it. What did he find in the original text? He said that the 14th Amendment regarding birthright citizenship, let me put it simply, in 3 sentences. Anyone born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction, that's what subject to the jurisdiction means, they are off. They are American citizens. So the issue of birthright citizenship is, of course, being born in the United States. The next part is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. But he says there's a problem here. Illegal immigrants are not necessarily under U.S. jurisdiction. For example, diplomats. If a diplomat comes to the U.S. and has a child here, if Native Americans leave their reservations, everyone knows that reservations are like a country within a country in the U.S., and have children outside the reservation, those children do not have U.S. citizenship. So what's the difference between illegal immigrants coming to the U.S. and Native Americans? Shouldn't they also not have U.S. citizenship? Okay, so the idea is that illegal immigrants are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But how should I put it? I think from a historical perspective, that's only half correct. Children born to diplomats in the U.S. indeed do not have U.S. citizenship. Why? Because, diplomats in the U.S. are truly not under the protection of U.S. law. Because diplomats in the U.S. represent foreign governments. They are not subject to U.S. law. If they commit a crime, you can't arrest them. Even if it's a criminal offense, you can't arrest or prosecute them. Even in civil matters, in most cases, you can't sue them either. The only ways the U.S. can punish them are two. First, expulsion. Second, request that the country which sent them handle the matter themselves. For example, what if a diplomat is caught speeding or driving under the influence? The police don't care about that, right? The police are often state police, county police, or city police. The police will give them a ticket, but if they don't pay it, do you know what happens? Actually, there's nothing that can be done. The State Department will tell these police officers to just leave them alone. We really can't collect money from them. They're foreigners. They're representatives of a foreign government. So diplomats truly are not subject to U.S. law while in America. So, of course, the children they give birth to also comply with the provisions of the Constitution, the amendment stipulations. They are not Americans. Now, what's important is, for example, if a Native American gives birth to a child on a reservation, that child is not an American citizen. This is really how it is. It really was like this, but only before 1924. In 1924, the United States passed a law called the Indian Act, or the U.S. Indian Act. After that, when Native Americans had children in the U.S., those children had dual citizenship. So starting from 1924, with the passage of the Indian Act, Native Americans became people under U.S. jurisdiction. Therefore, when Native Americans have children in the U.S., when those children grow up and want to travel abroad, they use a U.S. passport. They don't use a passport from their Native American reservation. Most reservations don't even have passports, so they are still under U.S. jurisdiction. So now the core question is about illegal immigrants, those who sneak across the border without any authorization or come ashore by boat and somehow make their way into the United States. In such cases, are they under U.S. jurisdiction? This is the controversy we're discussing now. So the Supreme Court, obviously, Trump's Attorney General argued that these people are not Americans at all. So how could they be under our jurisdiction? But the Supreme Court clearly disagreed, saying, how could they not be under our jurisdiction? Illegal immigrants come to the United States. If they get caught speeding, aren't they fined? If they're fined, would they dare not pay? If they commit a crime by operating illegally, can they be arrested, right? If they kill someone, can they not be punished? Are there no consequences? So the Supreme Court justices believe that this argument is unconvincing to them. All right, so this is the situation. Let me put it plainly. Yesterday's debate was like a chicken talking to a duck. One side was talking about consequences, while the other was talking about reasoning. They're completely different things. So who was actually right? This is where it really comes down to how the case should be decided. This involves a philosophical discussion, because for the justices, if there is no textualism, on what basis do we make our rulings? How do we assess the nation's losses? What counts as a national loss, and who gets to decide? If you switch to an extremely left-leaning justice, they might think that without a large influx of immigrants, the U.S. would face a labor shortage. From the perspective of the nation, they would argue that we must let them in. So what do we do then, right? That's why he thinks there's no standard. He has no standard. So our standard is textualism. We judge according to how the Constitution is written, nothing else. Let's not overthink it, okay? So does this make sense? Of course, I think it does, right? But the result is absurd. It allows Chinese tycoons to keep doing these things, which really is ridiculous. So what should we do? It's precisely because there's no standard that we have textualism. But do we humans have a standard? Should America have a standard? What do you all think? Is there a standard? Can this country have a standard? I believe there is. Yes, this country does have a standard. The standard is the one established at the founding of the nation. And what is that standard? It's called natural law. What is natural law? Let me put it plainly for everyone. Natural law might sound unbelievable to you. In China, it's called the law of heaven, or heaven's mandate. In America, it's called natural law. So what is natural law? It's the morality passed down in religious scriptures.